Come on.
They're right there!
Let's go. Move, 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 move. This episode of Choices Not Chances podcast is sponsored by Louisiana Gun Shop, located on Highway 90 West in Broussard, Louisiana, just south of Lafayette. For more information, stay tuned at the end of this episode. This is Choices Not Chances podcast with Ryan and Matt. I'm your co-host, Matthew Charette. Sitting next to me is Ryan Rogers. Ryan.
All right, Yogi, thanks for being on after a while
here,
of trying to set it up. I appreciate it.
Happy to be here, brother.
Yeah, man, yeah. So, kind of a long story short, we connected through Ryan Fugit on Combat Stories, so shout out there. And I found your story extremely interesting as I watched there. I mean, not to give you the same interview, but I do want to go into some of the different aspects of, especially your career and flying for different services. I'd like to poke at that a little bit. And then, as we were talking offline, talk a lot more, towards the back half about transition and what guys can expect in that kind of talk. But before we get started, pointed questions in the beginning: where you come from, who you come from, kind of pecking order, and your culture of life, kind of growing up in the younger years.
Fire away.
All right. Well, let's start. Where do you come from?
I was born and raised in New York City. I mean, I'm sure you can tell that from the minute I opened my mouth. Born and raised in Manhattan. Grew up on the bricks, single working mom. I like to joke I was born with a silver spoon, but it got yanked. My dad was doing pretty well. He was older, so he was 66 when I was born. He died when I was 6. And long story short, back in those days, that they basically, the vultures came in and picked away at the estate, what he had left. And he had a few bucks left that he left my mom and myself. But, my mom didn't have the best lawyers, so that got chipped away. So, went from one sort of lifestyle. We lived in Europe a little bit when I was a kid. I actually spoke French. Things like that. Went to school in Paris, like for the first grade, then came back to the States. He died. And then, it all changed. My mom ended up having to go back to work as a secretary, and I started going to public school. I'm a public school kid all through high school. I went to an art-oriented high school because I could draw, I like drawing. And I mean, I basically grew up drawing airplanes, World War II battle scenes and stuff. But yeah, I mean, I'm a public school kid, grew up, basically single working mom, like a lot of guys in our former life,
Yeah.
And was a little bit of I straddled the line between being a good kid and a not so good kid. Definitely did some things growing up that I regret or won't advise doing but was always interested in the military, and I don't come from a military family at all.
Right. Now, if I might interject, where would be the first, what's the first memory of service, not even a flying, of just, were you born with this?
I don't have a distinct memory. I do have a distinct decision that I was going to be a Marine. That I can tell you specifically, but I just was always fascinated with airplanes. I mean, there's a picture of me. I think I was all of 3, standing in a bathtub, bubble bath, holding an airplane. My mom's brothers served in World War II. My uncles, but they were like everyone else. They did their thing and came back. My one uncle was in the Navy. He was a gunner on those merchant ships, the convoys. Mm-hmm. His claim to fame is his gun crew shot down an American aircraft. And then they brought the pilot on board, and the guy was pissed. And then my other uncle was a paratrooper, but he got injured in a training accident, actually took a round to the lung. And so he never got overseas. But, they did their thing and went back to their lives. And honestly, growing up, I have an older brother, but he was out of the house. He's 11 years older than me. So he was out of the house at 17. Mm-hmm. He missed the Vietnam thing because he was you know, taking, you know, he got a deferment for one reason or another. I'm not really sure why, you know, you know, to be quite honest, you know, my mom was, I guess, a typical Jewish mom. She wanted a doctor or a lawyer. I just wasn't having it. And I was just always interested in the military. But at about 9 years old, I saw the sands of Iwo. I know every Marine out there is going to think this is cliche, and it is. I saw the sands of Iwo Jima, right? Everybody in the Marine Corps seen it, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene at the end, the last scene, you know, John Wayne's character, Sergeant Stryker, gets taken out. They read his letter to his son, the famous actor at the time, John Agar, reads the letter, and then he gets up and he goes, all right, let's get back in the war. And then, you know, they're supposed to be on Suribachi, and they walk, cue the Marine Corps hymn, they walk down the smoke. And I remember as a 9-year-old kid, and honestly, this is exactly what went through my head. I don't know who these motherfuckers are, but I'm about that.
Mm-hmm.
And from that day on, I was pretty focused on being a Marine. Then I could make the nexus between being a Marine pilot, start reading everything I could about naval aviation, marine aviation. And all I did was read books and draw airplanes. You know, social media lets us connect with people we knew 30 and 40 years ago. And guys are like, man, all I remember you is drawing these epic air battles. And by the time I was like 10, I knew every World War II aircraft. You know, I mean, I'm still a World War II buff. You know, went to Normandy last year. I mean, just
nice.
I eat that stuff up. But and I was a history major, so. But I don't know. You know, from that point on, I was focused on the Marine Corps. But growing up the way I did, my mom was working 2 jobs at some points. I was hanging out. I knew I wanted to be a Marine officer. There was a Marine recruiting station, 86 in Lex, been gone for decades. You know, I first went in there, I was like 15, hung around there talking to them. You know, all the recruiters had been to Vietnam. And they were like, I was a skinny, scrawny little son of a bitch, too, you know? And, you know, they were like, well, you don't look like much, son, but maybe it'll happen. I don't know.
We'll see.
You know, and I just listened to them. I just listened to them talk to the other guys. And what I liked is they didn't, even then I remember they didn't bullshit. They were like, hey, I'm not going to bullshit, you know, because people spoke different then. They talked in norm. They were like, hey, I'm not going to bullshit you guys. It's going to suck, and they're going to beat the living shit out of you, and blah, 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 but it'll all be worth it in the end. And, you know, the majority of guys joining were inner city kids. You know, they weren't, you know, a few softies like me mixed in, but most of them were hard anyway. And then I got to college, but I still wasn't very polished. You know, I was still a D's, thems, and those guys. And it was time for me to walk in to get in the Marine officer program. You know, I'd done all the research. I'd done it. The Marine Officer Selection Office was on the West 20s in New York. I walk in there. I mean, I'm an idiot. I think I had a wife beater on when I walked in.
Oh, boy.
I mean, I walked in and, you know, I was like, yeah, you know, I'm interested in joining this program and blah, 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 blah. And there was a major there. He was a Mustang,
Nice.
right? Ribbons up to here, you know. And then there was some gunnery sergeant out of a movie, bald, big, ribbons up to here. Looking at, well, first of all, he looked at me like I was something off the bottom of his shoe. Like,
Yeah.
that, you know. Long story short, I give my spiel. The major brings me in his office and he goes, look, I'm not even going to entertain you applying for this program right now. He goes, there is an image we want of someone who's going to be a Marine Corps officer, and you ain't it. He goes, so, and I'm paraphrasing, and he's basically like, I'll give you 2 options. He goes, you can join the Marines reserves, because I know you're in college, which I suggest you do. He goes, or come back in a year and know how to present yourself. That's all he said. He didn't say,
Wow.
do this ABC. He just come back here in a year and know how to present yourself, right? I was kind of really focused on the officer thing, so I didn't want to do the reserve thing. Right, wrong, or indifferent, I just didn't want to do it, right? So, and this is before the internet. This is 1980, right? 80, 81 time frame. So I do all the research of how to make a good impression. You know, I went to the library, I read books, you know, how to make friends and influence people. I asked friends of my mom's who were business people. I learned that I needed to work on my vocabulary and how to present myself a little better. You know, when you're going to make a good impression, like I probably should have worn a polo shirt and khaki pants and, you know, all those things. And I spent the next year learning that.
Now, was anybody in your support system encouraging this and helping with this?
It was very neutral. My mom hoped I'd grow out of it. Eventually she got on board, and I'll tell you a funny story as we get into this a little later, and she introduced me to people, and and part of it, I'm not blaming her, but like she dated a guy who'd been a Marine aviator, and he was telling me all these stories like when I'm 12, and I'm like, wait, they pay you for this?
Yeah.
You know,
see, that was my question. There was somebody impressionable that was a Marine.
Yeah,
you talked before, but yeah.
Yeah, you meet guys who've been Marines all through your life, like cops. My doorman in my building, because we lived in a doorman building for a while. He'd been a Marine in Korea. Vinny, and I was just focused on it. So whenever I found out somebody was a Marine, I would pester the shit out, about, but from a family perspective, no discouragement, just neutral.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so, and as far as, to be honest, my mom was working, trying to keep a roof over our head. Like, she didn't have a lot of time.
Yeah.
We can go back to I used to get in trouble I got arrested. She came, the cop told her he beat the shit out of me. She's like, good. Because she was like, I have a report card from 8th grade where her parent response was, please help. Because I was out of, I was just a problem. So,
yeah.
And she was busy. So she couldn't help me. It's not that she wouldn't. It's that she was busy trying to, keep us above water, for lack of a better term. So I learned all this stuff. And again, what I learned about this was at the time when he told me that, that was like the worst thing in my life. Like I saw all my dreams evaporating before me. You know what I mean? And but you know how something you think is horrible turns out to be one of the best things that ever happened to you? Well, that is one of those seminal moments for me, because I learned that at least if I'm going to make an impression, I have to be a certain way.
Yeah.
I didn't go, oh, I'm not that guy. I don't want to pretend I'm some, rich kid, college boy. It wasn't like that. I was like, okay, this is what it takes. And then I started meeting people, business people, guys who never finished high school, but were very successful. And they're like, man, it's all about that impression. Friends of my mom's, I have to say, my mom was a single mom. She dated. And she dated everybody from gangsters, like the FBI was at my house, to, wealthy guys. She was an attractive woman. But it allowed me to interact with some interesting people that, looking back on it, I learned some things. And so I went back a year later and was miraculously accepted in the Marine Corps platoon leaders class program. So that's when I made my second big mistake. They give you the option of going 1 10-week officer candidate school class, or you could split it up into 2 6 weeks, 2 summers. And I took that option because in my mind, I was like, well, I'll have half the summer to go to the beach. Right? So I go to the first 6 weeks, and for the next year, I'm in just anxiety about having to go back. Right? And I couldn't quit because I talked so much shit about being a Marine that there was no way I could quit. Like, that's what got me through OCS. Was like, I can break my leg, because you can quit OCS after 3 weeks. You can say, this ain't for me. And a lot of guys do that. I was like, I can never do that. I talk too much shit, right? I'll never be able to go back to the neighborhood with any shred of dignity. So I'd be like, well, if I break my leg on the yoke course, that's fine, but I couldn't. So between my junior and senior year, my junior year, now I'm freaking out having to go back. And so from my 6 of us started, and only 2 of us went back the second summer. So
wow.
I remember the day before I had to go back for my second summer, I was in the back of my buddy's motorcycle. He was showing me his new motorcycle. We're driving around the streets of New York. And I was so freaked out about it. We stopped at a light. I just leaned over and threw up. I was just freaking out about going back.
Oh man.
And,
Now why was the first 6 weeks like just
imagine going to boot
miserable
camp
or?
twice. Like, imagine if you just had to go to Paris Honest, we got to come back next year and do the whole thing
Yeah, it'd be
over.
horrible. Yeah, yeah,
You know
yeah.
what I mean? I mean,
Even if you do good,
you,
it's like,
you got no grace. Like it was called PLC Junior, PLC Senior. Like, they didn't go, hey, okay, you guys know the routine. Just it was like get off the bus, line up, same thing.
oh
You
wow,
know,
okay.
same. Out of all, and it's funny for me. I don't know why. The most memorable thing about all those times was getting your sea bag and dumping your shit out and going through every item in the sea bag, right? And you know this, it's hot, right? You just got your head shaved. You're wearing a new skivvy shirt right out of the box, right? Right out of the, and
Mm-hmm.
sweat coming down, the sweat, your head stings, the sweat's pooled in your back, and it's like in your right hand, hold up one wet belt.
Yeah.
So there's your platoon. 39 guys hold it up in their right hand, but 2 guys hold it up in their left hand.
oh yeah.
So you know what's coming next, bends and thrusts. And again, some guys take to military life like a fish to water. I was not that guy. And they tell you to try to be neutral. And, the minute I open my mouth, so I couldn't be the gray man, right?
Yeah.
They kind of focused in on me because I was the Yankee. And I thought my name was Just Begin. Like, that's what I thought my name was, because they would just walk up to me out of nowhere. Whatever we were doing, one drill instructor or another would just walk up to me and go, Dorelis, Just Begin, and walk away. So I just either be new bends and thrusts. Like, I literally, and I've met guys. It's funny. I've met guys. I met one guy, literally random. He's like, we're talking about OCS. And he's like, oh, yeah, I was in golf company. And I was like, oh, I was in hotel company. And we talking it. And I introduced myself. And he goes, Dorelis. He goes, we used to wonder who you were, dude, because we'd hear your name being screamed from the other squad bay. And we'd be like, who is that poor bastard? Because I was just like, so
Oh man.
I made it through, but I just wouldn't quit. Like, I was middle of the road guy, maybe even lower half of the class and peer reviews and everything. I could do the PT, no problem. I just wasn't like, I just didn't take to it like a fish out of water. Land nav was a disaster for me. I remember one time, just being out in the woods, it was pretty foreign to me. I've been camping 2 times in my whole life, and
Now, did you
so
have a flight contract?
I did.
Oh,
But
you did. Okay. Okay.
yeah, I did, but it doesn't matter. You still got to
Yeah.
stuff,
Yeah.
and I was pretty good, expert on the range, but it's the experience, but having to do it twice, but having to go back that second time, was a little rough, but I'm glad I did. I spent a relatively short time in the Marine Corps, but I'll tell you that as I get older, I just turned 62. It becomes more and more valuable to me because it was such a transformative experience for me, from sort of a relatively spoiled. Not that my mom indulged me; it's just she was working, so I was kind of left to my own devices, and I was a little cocky, thought I was a tough guy from New York. And then, all my drill instructors have been to Vietnam, and you realize you're not really that tough, and this isn't your environment. There's other dudes there who are real studs at everything. And it was just a really good learning experience for me, and it was the most valuable. It'll go down as one of the most valuable experiences of my life. And like anybody else, the title Marine is important to me. I'm getting new ink, going over some old ink that I had as a kid, and putting new stuff. And I have my naval aviator wings. I'm putting H60 in the green feet, but I'm like, an EGA's got to be in there somewhere. And
Somewhere,
I'm like,
somehow.
Right. Like, it's just, it's a very difficult thing to articulate, but earning the title Marine is a very special thing to me anyway, and to other
No, it's
Marines,
everybody.
and it any success I've had, and I'd say I'm a moderately successful guy, but I mean, anything I did well in the military, the things I was able to do in the Air Force later on, were all because of the values and principles instilled in me in the Marine Corps, especially on the leadership side, especially when it comes to taking care of my people. I was well known for that. My enlisted guys trusted me, and they knew I had their best interest. And I was always take care of them first. They eat first. They do this. And I'm not slamming the Air Force. They just don't teach it at the same level, because a lot of Air Force officers just aren't going to have that level of responsibility that, let's say, an Army or a Marine officer is going to have, or a Naval officer.
Yeah.
The Navy, it's just a different sort of organizational map, where the Army, the Navy, Marine Corps sort of similar. As a junior officer, you'll have anywhere from 10 to 30 people that work for you. Won't be that way in the Air Force. So, and so those things I learned in the Marine Corps helped me down the road, both in the Navy, the Air Force, in the Army, all those things. And it means more to me. It always meant something to me, but surprisingly, it means more and more the further I get away from it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely something. It's definitely something for me that I'm proud of, that I'll always be proud of, and I'll wear that ink with honor and with pride. And and I don't know how other people feel about this, but what I think I don't want to let myself do is I don't want to ever let myself be defined by the time that I spent in uniform.
No,
that time is amazing time. It's great time. It's times of our lives, and it's pride, and it's honor, and it was honorable. But I try to warn guys, like, especially guys that are still in, if that's the biggest chapter in your book was that chapter or those chapters, you gotta, just like what we're talking about offline, that purpose that comes. Because if you derive all your purpose from service and from your service to whatever branch you're in, well, when that service ends, and it will end for all of us, it ends. Some of us a little shorter. In your case, you got to serve a long time, but still, when it ends, you're still going to have to deal with that. You know what I mean?
Yes, but and you bring up a good point, but I don't necessarily think that's exclusive to the military.
No, I don't either.
Because. And I think in Western society, we're often defined by what our job is, right? Mm-hmm. And even things that, whether it's a lawyer, whether it's a bank, whether I'm a stockbroker, I'm a commodities trader, all these things. So, unfortunately, we do let what we do define us. And then when you combine that with the intense experience that going to war is, it is difficult. And yes, again, what we talked about earlier, if there was sort of a way to tell people while they're in, or even before they get in, that this is going to be a huge experience in your life, whether you stay 4 years or 40 years, and it's going to be important, and especially if you have the opportunity to serve in combat. So then, but the caution that would be, it cannot define. And, I suffered from that. But again, I work with a lot of athletes. They go through the same thing when they leave their respective sports, and so at the high level there. And in Vegas, it's very fighter heavy. So I'm friends and work with a lot of fighters in my organization that are in it or are coaches. And, when they stop fighting, unfortunately, I lost a friend he took his own life because he never adjusted to his not being a professional fighter. And so I
think we wear it like it becomes an identity, right? And then once that's
tough,
your identity.
But I don't know how to combat that. I don't know. I think you just got to warn people that this is going to be something you're going to have to deal with. And then you have to sort of have a mental plan of, okay, this is over.
What's the new identity? What's the new purpose?
And then think about what that is. But specific to the Marine Corps, I'm not, because I didn't do anything in the Marine Corps, you know, and that's a regret of mine. I didn't fight in the Marine Corps. I didn't even get to go to flight school in the Marine Corps. So I didn't achieve any of the things I wanted in the Marine Corps. But the Marine Corps and the title Marine just, you know, it was the first time I ever had to push myself. It's the first time I had to run and where I had to decide, well, I'm going to keep running until I pass out because I'm not going to let this guy call me a pussy, or I don't want, or you don't want to, in some sick, odd way, disappoint your drill instructor. They almost become this sort of mentor, father figure in this sort of weird way, even though they're crushing your skull at every opportunity, right? And so you don't want to, so you learn to push yourself. You learn not to be selfish. You know, for me, I was a relatively selfish kid. Yeah, you know, and so I learned about those things. I learned that the Marine Corps is not about you. It's about the organization. It's about all those things, and they're very cliche. I mean, I don't have to tell you them, and I'm sure 90% of the people you have on the show say the same thing. I mean, all those values and principles that are instilled in you, that aren't innately in all of us, and then that sort of you transform, and then later in life you realize that you've been using those things in everything, and that it really is valuable. And then,
I think another thing, I think another big thing that the Marine Corps is just so good about, and it's just the way we're structured, right? But when you become a Marine, even on the enlisted side, you become a Marine, you begin leading people almost immediately. Like you're leading yourself, but at the young, ripe age of 19 and a half or 20, you're leading a team. Now you're responsible for 3 other lives, at least. And in a helicopter, same situation. You're responsible for that crew almost immediately, and we can talk about that moving on. But the Marine Corps does a great job of saying, no, you're going to lead. That's what you're here for.
No, yeah. I mean,
yeah.
That's what sets the American military apart, is that even young junior enlisted people are empowered to say, hey, if you might be the guy in charge before you know it, and need to be able to deal with it and make a decision. And, you know, our adversaries, you know, like I said, I'm a little bit of a military and a history geek. So, you know, the Russians, there's no autonomy in a Russian platoon. You know what I mean? They're, you know, their leadership, and if their leadership gets whacked, now it's personality based, right? Where you're right, you got a lance corporal leading a fire team, right? Now, if you're at a certain level, what the heck is going on? My phone is freaking out. That's freaky to me.
No worries.
Excuse me.
No worries.
My phone just started going off. That's so weird. I think I put it on my printer. I think the printer moving set it off. But
no worries.
Either that or some weird shit going on in my house. But you know, so you know, at a very young age, you know, and you can go, well, it's a fire team. It's not a big deal. It is a big deal if you're Lance Corporal Jones and these are your 3 boys. Then you take it up to the E5 who's got the squad. And then you've got the platoon sergeant, and you've got the lieutenant who's 22 years old and out of school, and he's got a rifle platoon. And if he's smart, he listens to his platoon sergeant, and they figure it out. And then he comes, you know, so, and the, you know. But
they're always leading. There's always somebody, you know, from a young age.
Corps. The Army does the same thing, and the Navy does the same thing, and the Air Force to an extent. The Coasties do it, but I mean, it's just the level of responsibility. The average person doesn't understand. Like,
fact.
I'm willing to guess the average person doesn't understand. And I read your book, and it was an awesome book.
Oh, thank you.
What you did, and the level of responsibility you had at a relatively young age, in arguably the most intense experience most human beings could have, right? So you've demonstrated already at a young age that it takes people 20, 30, 40 years to get to, or they never get to it because maybe they're a supervisor, a manager, or a district manager, area manager in a corporation. You're still not worried about people's lives. You're still not, you know, you're not as invested as it is, you know. And I read in your book, you went to sleep at night worrying about your boys. You went to sleep at night, you woke up worrying about your boys. You know, blah, blah, blah. You know, no one else does that. So it's such a unique unique experience that, and again, I think that, adds to why we have so much trouble down the line, is because in, no one gets it but another guy who's been through it, and the reason it's harder now in these last few wars is because percentage wise, we have sort of a warrior class in America. You know, less than 1% of people serve. You look at World War II, but well, they didn't have these problems with World War II. I'm like, that's because when people bought their first house in the suburbs on Long Island, if there were 10 houses, 9 guys served in World War II. So when you had your barbecue, you're talking to your neighbors.
Good point.
This guy was on a USS ship. This guy was at Normandy. This guy was at Iwo. This guy jumped into Holland. This guy was at the Battle of the Bulge. This guy flew 77 missions over Germany. Whatever. Everybody did it, right? Maybe even the
so
guy
there was some relatability and some empathy, right, you're saying?
Well, because everybody got those, when they had the beer, they talked their stuff out.
Yeah.
And they talked about the things that we don't get to talk about because regular people don't want to hear, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But at the barbecue, if you're a World War II veteran, you talked about all the horrible things. You talked about losing friends. You talked about liberating concentration camps. You talked about seeing guys smoked by flamethrowers. You talk about how Marines on Iwo Jima will pull the gold teeth out of Japanese, all the crazy shit that people go, oh my God, that's horrible. That's this. And it is horrible, but people have the average person has no, because I'm no lover of humanity at all, right? So the average person does not understand the level of violence and depravity that exists in the world.
No, that's, the average person in our country. Yeah, I agree.
Right. So they complain about nonsense and, we can go in and things, but they don't understand the level of violence and depravity that's just out there. And so
the question is that not a testament to how free we are as a nation?
Absolutely.
To the fact that our people don't even know that it is real. And I used to say that was a great thing and a beautiful thing. And the older I get and maybe the more wobbly the world looks to me, I don't know that's a good thing anymore. I don't know that we haven't gotten completely removed, and because now it's coming for military culture, as in sights of some of these people, and it's like, well, like maybe you do need another tragedy to wake you up and make you remember what one man will do to another man.
No, I agree, Ryan. I mean, I think,
and I don't like saying that, but
I don't want another tragedy. I don't want it, but we're to the point now where we've got it so good that we just pick at everything, and I'm like, obviously, like all veterans, I don't want the military fucked with, for lack of a better term, because our job is to be lethal, period, end of story.
Mm-hmm.
To be the most lethal, deadliest fighting force on the face of the earth so that any adversary knows we'll crush them, and that's the way it needs to be. But I think it's good that the average person doesn't worry about it. But on the other hand, there's a cost to that, is that we deal with these morons talking about stuff and you're like, what are you talking about? Like in other countries, they'll throw you off a fucking roof.
Mm-hmm.
Like
it doesn't make us any more lethal, some of the things that we're distracted with.
And I mean, so it's we live in a great society, a free country, and it's great, but we are sheltered from the rest of the world by 2 oceans, friends to the north that are pretty calm, friends to the south, calm enough. If we're not careful, we're going to run into problems we're having there, but they're not adversaries. They're not enemies actively looking to hurt us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't think these people are bad actors out there. We forget quickly the tragedies that can happen.
I think that's key right there. We forget quickly.
And so we complain and worry about things that are silly. But the thing about it is, getting back to what I was saying earlier, is that you and I could sit down and talk about things and we can get as gruesome as we want, and it probably won't affect us very much. We'll sit and share a cocktail right. But I've had people ask me stuff, and I'm, as a helo guy, I can't say I've seen the aftermath, of what you see. I was the guy carrying the aftermath, but people ask me and I tell them, and you can see their eyes glaze over and they look at you like you got a cyclops eye in the middle of your head, and they, within a minute or less they're tuned out because they can't wrap their heads around it, right?
Yeah.
And that I think is one of the psychological problems, adds to some of the issues veterans have, right? Where we could get together, if you're in Vegas and I bring you to my merging vets and player group, and you go to one of our huddle sessions that we have, and sometimes they get heavy, you're going to relate. You just go, okay, I'm not alone. You know what I mean? There were times where I thought I was literally insane. I'm like, I'm insane, and if I reveal the way I'm thinking to anyone, they're going to lock me up and throw away the key. Until I found out somebody else thought like me.
Yeah.
And I have a very specific story about that, related to being at Bethesda Naval Hospital with a buddy of mine who was shot down and subsequently passed away. But so, the veteran experience after World War II is they had each other to talk to. And when they had their barbecues, they talked about stuff. It was just normal. The wives sat around and chatted about whatever. The men talked about, this happened to me over Germany. This happened. Oh, shit, I remember this on Ewo. This is the Battle of Bulge. My ship got shot out from under me. All the crazy experiences that people had. So they talked about it, right? Well, in these later wars, Korea, Vietnam, the two Middle East wars, 20 years of war. And you and I can walk out in the street and walk 10 blocks without maybe meeting one veteran. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So you could feel isolated and alone. And that's a problem.
Yeah, I think so. And I've said on other shows too, like, I think that we don't talk about religion, politics, and war. And at some point that started. At some point, people started telling their kids not to ask these questions. Don't have this political debate in public because, I don't know, it'll get, out of control, whatever. But like out of all of the things, religion, politics, and war maybe should be what we talk about the most, because it's the most disconnected that our whole nation is over those three things. Now, maybe not always war, but the other two people fight about all the time and since the beginning of time. Religion and politics, always a fight. But why'd we stop talking about war? Who said it's not okay to talk about war?
Because if you're sitting at the dinner table, right, you're the only guy in your family. I don't know you. I'm just making this
No, I got it.
Hypothetical. But if you're the only guy in your family that served, right? Here, I'll give you an example from me. So it's if someone asks me about a flight and I tell them, we picked up these bodies that the insurgents let us know where they were, and they've been buried in shallow graves for 3 weeks. Now we got them in the back of the aircraft, and I go, man, it really stunk, and it really, really was stinky.
Yeah.
And blah, and it was, blah, blah, blah. I mean, the average that was a reality that day for me, right? But the average person, like, oh my God, why are we talking about something so horrible? It's just not done. Right? Now, I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying, is it right? I don't know if it's right to jam it down their throat for people who look, there's some people.
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying, like, at some point, though, somebody said, we don't talk about these things. And so generally people stopped asking veterans questions on a real side. Now, maybe they stopped asking people questions because veterans were like, oh, fuck you, or, you don't know what it's like. Maybe there was a little bit of that.
They have this stereotype. I hundreds of times I've had people like, the way they deal with me is they think I'm some sort of damaged goods. They don't know anything about me. They don't know. So as an actor, right, I can say two things. I can say, one, that's a group generally that completely different background and lifestyle. Maybe not background, but certainly different lifestyle than I've, right? Mm-hmm. However, I've run into a lot of veterans in that group too. So maybe, but the ones that don't know anything about the military, they'll ask me things and they're very tentative. Like they think, well, if I ask him this, is he going to lose his temper?
Well, that's my, yeah. Why do people think
ask me
that?
Whatever you want. I don't care. I'm not going to get upset. Like the example you get, I've been asked many times, have you ever killed anybody? I'm like, nah, I never killed anybody. I said, I've had a hand in killing some people. I made a couple of radio calls, and after that, some people disappeared.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like, I've made a call to an AC-130, and I made some bad men go away. I said, but no, but it's a stupid question. You know, because what do you think war is? Like, my thing is when I get frustrated when people are like, well, why are we doing this? And I saw this, and I'm like, you understand war is extreme violence. It isn't there. Yes, there's rules per se, but at the end of the day, kill these motherfuckers so that they don't hurt you or your friends. Period. End of story. You know what people freak out about? How many people don't get this? When I tell people, we're not fighting for the flag. Nobody's going apple pie, mom, remember 9/11, blah, 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 blah. All that other bullshit. You know what you're fighting for? Your homies. Period. End of story. They don't get that. What do you mean? I'm like, it's just your unit. It's just the people you're in.
Well, because when you get on the ground, that's all you have. That's what they don't know.
Or the job is like, people like, I'm like, you know, I'm like, there's a guy. They're like, what makes you go out there? I'm like, because if I don't go, there's a guy out there who's going to die. Right? Yes, I'm scared. Yes, I'd rather not go. But if I don't go, how dare I not go when that guy's already out there in the shit?
If not me, then who? Well, you got guys to go after.
Coming for you. Right?
Yeah,
you know
got
guys
to go after. Absolutely.
It's like, so it's just, you know, war is like an alternate universe. Like it is like you're there and you're disconnected from the real world. You know, that's I guess why Vietnam, they say going back to the world or whatever, because you're disconnected. Like, and people go, why'd you like it? I said, because sometimes it was simple. My bucket list was don't get killed today.
Yeah.
Eat, sleep, work out. I told someone, I said, if I didn't have a family, if I didn't have my wife and kids who I love dearly, but I was a single dude, and you told me I can get laid once a week, I'd never go home.
Yeah.
Never go home because my life is simple.
War was easy. A lot of grunts will say the same thing. They'll say, well, like the way I felt, like I come back home and it's like max anxiety and it's bills and it's schedules and it's what do the kids have and it's what's the wife's schedule and where do we want to eat becomes an issue. And like at war, it was like protect my friends, kill the enemy, keep my squad as good as we can, and inflict as much damage on the other side as we possibly can to bring him to his knees. And if I just do those things, everything's fine. And there's no worry. It's not about what are we eating tonight, whatever the fuck they feed us. It's not about are the bills paid. The bills don't even exist anymore to me. It's not in this world.
My wife, she would, be bitching to me about something. I said, baby, I can't do nothing. There's money in the bank. Take care of it. I'm out here trying not to, and I understand why the wives get frustrated. They think we're out here fucking off. They don't know what we're doing, so they know that they're feeling it completely on themselves. Like, this T-shirt I'm wearing is like literally encompasses everything. You see guys that have these T-shirts, recon or this or that, Ranger. Mine is Wen's Chow, and it's got a knife and fork cross. And because that to me is like, that was a Wen's Chow.
Chow.
The simplicity of it. I joke. I said, what was it? My bucket list was don't get killed. That was my bucket list for the day, right? How that is liberating from the life we lead normally. And we're also, man, I think it's a primal thing. Like men from cavemen on were bred to fucking take a club and club this other motherfucker. I'm sorry that people think we've evolved out of that.
I think some men, right? Because I think it's archetypical. I think if your archetype is that you're going to be a protector, then, well, you don't really have an option. I think you're going to be a protector. And if your archetype is that you're going to be a baker and a nurturer, then I think you're going to be that. But when talking to our community of people, our archetype is the protector archetype. And if we're not doing that, I don't think we feel right.
I'm a huge fan of podcasts. So I listen to all these podcasts, Ryan's, I listen to all, and when I listen to these guys' story, it's the same as mine, even though our backgrounds are different. I don't know if something was in me from the time I was young that said, I am drawn to this profession, right? none of my friends that I grew up, well, I mean, a couple of my buddy Chris was in the Marines. Now he's a fireman. So yeah, he was built for that too. But he's
few and far between percentage wise.
Firefighter. He's third generation firefighter too. But I mean, but none of my friends, you know, wanted any part of that, right? Mm-hmm. But for me, I don't know. It was just something that was in me that I was always just drawn to, right? So I agree. I don't know if it's a gene. I don't know what it is, but it's primal. So, you know, we're like, war is bad, and it is bad. It's man's. I struggle with the fact that war is man's worst endeavor, and I was kind of good at it. And I struggle with that a little bit, right? But I think it's primal. Men were meant to be out here, and we've convinced ourselves that we've evolved out of violence, live in a society where they try to ridicule people. You know, I grew up with a single mom. I joke, my mom taught me how to be a man. You know what I mean? I watched her go to work every fucking day, range, down, sick, not sick, to make sure we were covered. You know, so, but it's sort of primal. Like, we provide, we protect, we do this. I'm not saying I'm a tough guy, but I believe in the roles of a man, and yeah, I think that's part of it. So when some of us get in that environment, like, people go like, "Did you hate it?" I'm like, "No, I loved it." And again, I struggled with that. Eventually, when I came to grips and said, "No, I like flying in combat," it was like a fucking weight off my shoulders, because I was like, I shouldn't have liked it, but I liked it. You know, we get a scramble and I get excited. I'm like, all right, let's go knock this out. And yeah, I was terrified sometimes. I'm not going to lie, but I have days, I have at least 3 or 4 days that I remember where I was in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I remember one specific, we were coming back from a mission, we were covering a raid. The Rangers were raiding a joint, and we were supporting them. And we get back to Balad, the sun's coming up. I'm safe in my M4, putting it in the truck. And I look over, and the little birds are flying right by, right? Then the 60s with the shooters come in and land. They land, right? And like, all the shooters got their legs hanging out, and you're fucking just waving at them. And then they land, and they're coming out. They got some fucking prisoner, and the dog's trying to rip the prisoner's feet off, and they're pushing them, and it's the sun's coming up, and I'm like, there's no place I'd rather be in the world right now.
Yeah.
Right here, right now. And people go like, that's crazy. I'm like,
they've never been there.
I'm like, and I have 3 or 4 of those moments, just like I had moments where I was like, God, guys make fun of me. Before my first combat mission, I prayed, and they go, what'd you pray for? And I said, I just asked God to not let me be a pussy and not let me fuck up.
Yeah.
I said, please, God, don't let me be a pussy. Don't let me fuck up.
Oh, yeah.
And the guys laugh, because some of these guys are real religious, and they're like, and I was just like, man, I just asked the man upstairs straight out, like, just don't let me fuck shit up.
Yeah.
But those are things like, the average person thinks you're sort of weird. And that's why me and you can relate, right? Yeah. I can sit with a guy like Ryan and talk about flying and stuff. We can relate. And the average person, like, I don't get it, man. My father grew up. But the thing is, I've spoken to World War II veterans. I've spoken to Korea veterans, and they all same thing. They had nightmares and they had all these things, but they still thought it was the best fucking time of their lives. Like, I spoke to some fucking fighter pilot from World War II, P-51 Mustang pilot. It was the greatest. And he was this great guy. That's the thing. He's this old guy at the time. He was in his 80s, and you're like, he's an old. It was like just talking to one of your buddies. He's like, that was great. We're flying all over Europe. I was going to London, getting late every night. I mean, he was like, it was the greatest time of my life.
Yeah.
And he, and then, and we look up to these guys, and then they'll come to me, and he's like, oh, you Hilo guys are crazy. I would never do what you do. I'm like, you flew 90 missions over Germany. What are you talking about?
Yes, you would.
I'm like, I'm in awe of these guys, and they're acting like I'm some sort of big hero. And I'm like, I didn't fly 30 missions. My friend's dad flew B-17s. He lasted 3 missions before he was captured. The first 2 missions, the aircraft was so shot up, they never flew again. On his 3rd mission, he was shot down and became a POW.
Oh, my God.
That's, statistically, the odds were against you surviving 30 missions over Germany The 8th Air Force lost more people than the entire Marine Corps did in World War II. You know, I mean, craziness.
Well, let's get back to your career a little bit.
Yeah,
so you finish up yeah, I know. So you finish up with the Marine Corps. You say you didn't go to flight school with the Marine Corps. How'd that shake out?
So I got my commission in the Marine Corps, 2nd lieutenant, went to TBS where all new Marines go, right? And I was very lucky. I finished the whole 6 months. And we just came back from the 3-day war, which is kind of like the crucible thing. And they call us into the auditorium called O'Bannon Hall, named after Presley O'Bannon. And I'm paraphrasing. They basically go, guys, it sucks to be you. We have too many pilots in the Marine Corps on all ends of the pipeline, right? So they gave us a choice. They said, if you drop your air contract, we'll give you any MOS you want, regardless of your standing in the class. Because, you got rated by your peers, so based on where you were in the class had a lot to do with MOS you got.
Right.
But they said, if you drop your air contract, any MOS you want. So a few guys did that. And they said, the rest of you, we're going to put you in other MOSs for 18 to 24 months. And, fill out your dream sheet, blah, 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 and then at the end of that time, as the backlog eases up, you'll get your orders for flight school. So I had orders to the 7th Truck Battalion, Camp Pendleton, California, right? Needless to say, I was not a happy camper. Well, one of the lieutenants in my class, his dad was a Navy admiral, and he worked at Nav Air. Now, as you know, naval, Marine Corps, Coast Guard, naval aviation, it's all naval aviation, right? So he walks over to his Marine counterpart and goes, hey, what's going on? And the guy's like, oh, yeah, blah, blah, blah. So my friend's dad goes, well, we're short pilots. Like, we're short, shows him the graphs, we're really short. Do you think some of these guys would want to come over to the Navy and get right to flight school? And I'm like, well, we'll see what happens. You can go down there and ask, but these are hard-charged Marines. They're not going to want to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
So long story short, about a week and a half later, these Navy 06s show up, give us their spiel. You can get to flight school right away, blah, 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 blah. Who's interested? Fill out the list. End of story. That afternoon, the way TBS is set up, you're in a company with 4 platoons, and your student platoon commander is a captain who's had at least one fleet tour, right? So in my platoon, 2 of the student platoon commanders were infantry officers, and 2 were aviators. So they each wanted an opportunity to talk to us, right, as a whole. So the first guy, I'll never forget this guy's name. His name was Captain Loxon. Dude looked like a Cro-Magnon man, right? This guy came out of the womb. He was only going to be a Marine infantry officer, right? He's been an enlisted guy. He's about 5'9", looked like a gorilla, square jaw. Looked like, imagine Jocko, but a little shorter, right? But the same mold, right? Says, I'll never forget this. He goes, I'd rather dig ditches in the Marine Corps than fly airplanes for the Navy. Any of you guys who are considering this are a fucking traitor, and I won't have anything to do with you. And he walks out. And we're all like, I'm like, are we joining the Russian Navy? Like, what's going, are we thinking about? And then the next infantry guy comes in, completely different guy. It was like an Ivy League guy from Yale, real kind of reserve guy, nice guy, but just he's like, hey, I'm not going to tell you guys what to do. You got to do what's best for you guys. I wish you the best of luck, whatever you decide. You've all worked hard, and you have we'd love to have you in the Marine Corps, but, I understand a lot of you worked hard to get to flight school. Good luck. He leaves.
Yeah.
The 2 pilots come in together, and they go, listen, if any of you guys repeat this, we'll deny it. But if you guys don't take this deal, you're fucking stupid. And they walk out.
Deal.
So that kind of made
Sold.
up my mind for me.
Yeah.
You know, these guys were both Marine helicopter pilots, everything I wanted to be, right?
Yeah.
So I had took about a month or so for the paperwork to come through, maybe a little more. So I had the H&S platoon, which was the guys who fixed the range. It was all the blind, crippling, crazy guys. Guys pop positive for drugs. It's great because as a new 2LT, I had guys saluting me with their left hand, just
nice.
doing shit, you know. So it was, I had to like man up a little bit, you know what I mean, and like not be a candy ass.
Yeah.
And you know, and I was a typical dopey lieutenant. Like, I'll tell you one of my favorite Lieutenant 2LT stories. I was the assistant base duty officer. So basically, I'm shadowing this major who was the duty officer for the whole Quantico Marine Base, right? So I'm in my alphas with and I'm under arms, you know, the whole thing, right? And he's these guys back then, you had all these Mustangs. This guy's like a 50-something-year-old major, crusty.
Yeah.
The NCO driver's like a staff sergeant, crusty. You know, these guys are like out of a movie. You know what I mean? And you're just like for me, I'm just like in awe of these guys. Because I'm like, these are the kind of Marines I want to be like, you know? So we check everything out on the base. We go to the brig, you do all the duty officer shit, and it's mid-rats. So we show up at mid-rats at the chow hall, and it's packed because you got HMX-1 there, and so it's pretty busy. So I get out of the vehicle. He goes, "Go ahead and I'll follow you. You know, we'll be in a second, right?" So I get out I put my cover on. I put my pitch cutter on. I'm doing my 2-finger thing, checking my gig line. I roll in there, right? And the chow hall's packed. And I'm just walking up and down. I'm like, "How you doing, Devil Dog? What's going on, Marine?" And I notice everybody's kind of snickering and looking at me and smiling or laughing. I'm like, why's everybody laughing at? Like, what the F's going on? And, you know, unfortunately, I drop a lot of F-bombs, even when I'm talking to myself. So what are all these guys laughing at? I'm walking through and I'm trying to be like this cool officer. Like I've seen the grizzled old guys, how they are with the Marines. You know, you emulate the leaders you want to be like. And so I'm walking through the chow hall, boom, boom, boom. Finally, this guy in a flight, she goes, hey, sir, can I talk to you for a minute? And I'm like, what you got, Devil Dog? You know, like that, you know, just, and he goes, "Hey, sir, your cover's on backwards."
Yes.
And so then I fix it out, and I see this major and the staff, they're laughing. I'm like, "Hey, sir, did you know I had my cover on backwards?" He goes, "You goddamn right I knew you had your cover on backwards. I wasn't going to say it."
That's your cover.
Oh, man, it was great. But I mean, and then, I don't know, about a month and a half later, I basically got my DD-214 from the Marine Corps, sidestepped over, swore into the Navy as an ensign. A week later, I was in Pensacola.
Wow.
Pensacola
Isn't that silly how that works?
Yeah. And, you know, year and a half of flight school later, got ended up selecting helicopters and ended up flying CH-53Es anyway, which is what I wanted to fly in the Marine Corps.
Boom.
And got stationed in the Philippines.
How was that?
Flew helicopter. I'm sorry?
How was the Philippines?
Oh, man, it was great.
Yeah, I've heard good stories, yeah.
It was pre all this nonsense. So it was the old mill. It was a work hard, play hard time. And, you know, and then I got married, brought my wife over. I was there about 6 months by myself. Then I brought my wife over and my daughter, who I ended up adopting at the time. And we lived like kings. It was great. I loved it. We really enjoyed it. You know, again, being stationed overseas, what you make of it. I decided, hey, I'm on this cool adventure. My ex-wife was a Navy brat. My father-in-law is a retired Navy Master Chief. She lived in Africa, in Eritrea of all places, which is, you know, Somalia, and you know, I got a picture of her with Haile Selassie because he was a communicator, my father-in-law. So there was a big radio station there. And so I was worried when she came over to the Philippines, but she was, you know, we went out in town. She was all used to it from living in Africa. Other wives it's dirty, it's this, it's that. She was like, I'm all about this. So we loved it. great flying, fun. Had all the single fun there too that you can have. We don't have to, probably not a place to discuss that, but it's a great time. Good
Good
flying.
time.
Came back, was in Norfolk for another 3 years, and then thought I wanted to get out, going to the corporate world. My second daughter
Norfolk,
was
what?
born.
Stationed right there in Norfolk?
Yeah, Naval Air
Okay.
Station Norfolk.
Yeah, I was just there. That's crazy. Last
Yeah.
week I was actually in Virginia Beach, but we had to go
Yeah,
over
we
there
lived in
for.
Virginia Beach. I mean, lived
Mhm.
right near, uh, lived off of Shore Drive, and
Okay.
and yeah, it was really cool. Lived near Dam Neck at one point.
Yep.
So my neighbor were two SEAL Team 6 guys.
You hear
You
that?
know, yeah,
It
my
sounds
two
like
neighbors were
bombs.
like, they had full beards like you and everything, and they were like, "Oh yeah, yeah, we work in here and there." I'm like, "Didn't I see you the other day when you jumped out of my helicopter?" Like, "Oh no, that wasn't us." We laugh about that shit all the time. But got to do some cool stuff. Lots of hurricane relief.
Yeah.
The Philippines were a little unstable, so I was always flying the Marine barracks guys from
Okay.
QB Point or the Subic Bay Marines into the embassy to reinforce the embassy and stuff, because Marcos was having some problems back then because people were
Okay.
pissed because Imelda had too many shoes, and it was really cool. And then I did 3 years in Norfolk. Thought I wanted to get out. Started working in the corporate world. I lasted 6 months
What'd
before I
you do?
realized it was I was a field service support manager for Airborne Express, which used to be a competitor of FedEx
Okay.
and UPS, and hated it. Was back in New York, hated it. My wife was back in Virginia. I ended up quitting that job. In the meantime, I still wanted to fly, so I shotgun paperwork out to all the Guard and Reserve units out there. I was actually hoping to get in the Marine 46 Squadron.
Okay.
But that didn't work out. I ended up getting in the Army Guard on Long Island, flying Hueys. Became a W
Oh,
two and
cool.
was just flying Hueys. This was actually awesome, a lot of fun. And then I started working in the theater business for my buddy, who I grew up with, in ticket sales on Broadway, and that was a
Okay.
great job. It's a union job, pays very well, really good job. Got to work a lot of great hit Broadway shows, and was a really good job. And I was flying in the Army Guard while doing that. But I didn't think I'd be able to get back into service, but I was
So at
really
this point,
missing it.
you've
Like
been in the Marine Corps,
Marine Corps and the
kind
Navy,
of
I had
swung over
about
to the Navy, ran that contract out flying for them,
right
46s, and now you're in the Army Guard flying Hueys.
Hueys, old Hueys, Vietnam era
Love it.
Hueys.
All
It was
right. So you've
awesome.
been in 3 service branches,
Right.
flown
And
on multiple platforms.
that was fun because all the guys were like cops, firemen, lawyers. They'd all been in Vietnam, most of them. There was a few youngsters, and so I'd go in on a drill week, and plus I'd go in and fly 2 or 3 times a week. And
Mm-hmm.
the Guard is a great gig because if you get a full day's pay for a half day's work. So if you work after 12 noon, you're getting paid for 2 days,
Mm.
right? So, you'd always be able to work those really cool drug deals. But the cool thing about the Guard was you had all these crusty old dudes. So we'd go in, and the lieutenant, who had maybe 12 flight hours, would come in and brief, "I need you guys to go do this training and blah, blah, blah." And the W3 would be, "Yes, sir, we'll take care of it." Lieutenant walk out, and he'd go, "We're not doing it. We're flying down to Atlantic City, and we're going to go eat at this Chinese buffet I know down there." And it was just always stuff like that. Like in the 6 years I was there, we did very little tactical flying.
Yeah,
And some
yeah.
of these guys were the best pilots in the world. So they all ended up subsequently going back to Iraq anyway. After I was in the Air Force, that unit got activated, went to Iraq, and all these guys did fine. But, the most tactical shit we did was fly the cadets at West Point around, or we do our 2 weeks at Fort Drum and do
Mm-hmm.
stuff. But it was just a lot of fun. Good group of guys. I'm still friends with a lot of the guys. Like I said, a majority of guys were New York City cops and firemen. And then there was an opening in the Air Guard, the unit that was, if you've ever seen the movie The Perfect Storm,
Mm-hmm.
right? I know that was that unit, the 106 Rescue Group. And I applied, and somehow I caught them when there was an opening, and I was accepted, and ended up knowing all the guys from that perfect storm. The guys who survived that were all guys I flew with subsequent.
Hmm.
And they were training me in house in the 860 and everything, and then an opportunity to go to the schoolhouse in Albuquerque came up, and they said, "Would you be willing to go?" It'd be about 9 months active duty, and I was like, "Yeah, heck yeah!" And so I took a leave of absence from my job in the theater, and went to Albuquerque and was learning to fly to 60 and all the tactics and all the combat rescue tactics, and then the active duty guys were like, "Man, the Air Force is really short pilots. We got a lot of Army pilots swapping over, and blah blah blah." And then a couple of weeks later, the Air Force assignments guy, the guy who gives out the assignments to all the Air Force helicopter pilots, was there doing a base visit to talk to guys. So I cornered him in the hallway, and I'm like, "Hey, what if I wanted to come back on active duty?" And I gave him my background, and he's like, "Yeah, I mean, the guard didn't put you through flight school, so put in a request, and if your boss approves it, I'll bring you on for 2 years." And I did that, and I got 2 years active duty. September of '98, I went back on active duty, and then about a year and a half into it, I found out I was eligible for the bonus, so I just decided to take the bonus, and I stayed, and then I ended up spending almost 14 years in the Air Force, flying Pedro, and
Yeah, talk to
and
me
doing.
about that. That's one thing I wanted to really speak on because I got to witness that shit with my eyes a lot of times, and it was insane.
I mean, listen, I missed. Obviously, a lot of my friends were doing the stuff that you saw coming to help you guys. I flew my 2 Afghanistan tours were very early. Like I flew in Operation Anaconda, right?
Yeah,
So
talk to me about that.
I was here at Nellis Air Force Base. 9/11 happens, right? I'm on leave actually because my wife at the time had some back surgery, and I worked in the World Trade Center for my brother in the summers in college, and then when I was a Navy pilot, my mom got sick, had heart surgery, and I did permissive TDY, and the officer selection office for the Navy was in the World Trade Center. So I know that place like the back of my hand. I've worked there on 4 separate occasions in my life, right? And I'm born and raised in Manhattan. So I wake up on 9/11, TV's on, um, and I see, I wake up, I turn on the news that they're talking, oh, a small plane hit and I'm like, it's clear blue and a million. How did a plane run into the World Trade Center? And I'm like, I don't know, it doesn't seem right, but they're talking about it. They're like, it's a small plane. I'm like, that's a pretty big fire for a small plane, but I'm, I'm in the dark like everybody else. I'm just scratching my head going, what? That's really weird, but whatever. And then all of a sudden, as I'm watching it, I see the other plane. I'm like, oh, that doesn't look good. Boom. Right. I'm like, okay. I I run downstairs. I tell my wife, I said, turn on the news. She turns it on. She goes, I'm not sending the kids to school. I said, don't. I said, but I think I got to go into work.
Mm-hmm,
I said,
mm-hmm,
I think my leave is about to get canceled. So I said, I'm rolling into work.
mm-hmm.
Took 3 hours to get to work because of the trap, because the base went to DEFCON 1 or whatever those
ThreatCon Delta.
those threat cons, yeah, those threat cons were. So, and at the time, my brother was a commodities trader working in the World Trade Center. So they collapsed as I'm sitting in traffic, listening on the radio. And I'm like, shit, I think my brother's dead. I'm like, shit, I'm going to have to tell my mom later, but I got to get into work right now. You compartmentalize, like you just, and luckily my brother called my house to tell me he was okay. So my daughter called me to say, hey, Uncle Stevie's fine. He called. I wasn't worried about my mom because I know she ain't down at the World Trade Center at 9 in the morning. So,
Yeah.
And we get on base. They arm the helicopters. It was just a very weird next few days.
Mm-hmm,
And then a few weeks later, we get orders, man. They're like, we're going to Pakistan. And it's like right after the initial right before the initial invasion, when they put the SF teams in and stuff, all that was staged out of Pakistan.
mm-hmm.
So we went to Jacobabad, Pakistan. And then right after the Marines turned Kandahar over to the 101st, they told us to go up to Kandahar, me and about 10 folks to set up ops up there. And we went up there and set up our ops, started flying a few missions, started hearing about this operation Anaconda. My boss was all very linked in. All my bosses had been in Air Force Special Operations, so they all were linked in, all the Task Force Dagger and all these task forces, so we were figuring out what was going on. And then Anaconda kicked off. We weren't even part of it. We weren't in the planning. We had nothing to do with it.
Now, for people that are listening, can you just give like an overview of what that op was about?
Yeah. So in the initial stages of after we invaded Afghanistan, initially took over Kandahar, Camp Rhino. The plan was to do this sort of enveloping operation on the large elements of the Taliban in the Hindu Kush and in the Shai-Kot Valley, right? Which is about halfway up from Kandahar to Bagram on the east side of that main valley that goes up Afghanistan in the Shai-Kot Valley, and the Coast Guard is there, right? And so it was this plan. It was honestly a shitty plan, but they were going to infill the army. The special ops guys were in the hills. And of course, the blocking force was going to be the local forces, right? Like we didn't learn our lesson in Tora Bora doing that, right? But so they infill, and they told all the NGOs to get out of there and to leave because there was a lot of NGOs there doing stuff, and so they knew we were coming, right? So there was no ARTI, no fire support plan. They infill 101st and the 10th Mountain into the low ground. The enemy has all the high ground. Long story short, we start getting our asses handed to us pretty quick, right? All the Army Apaches, they're doing those European tactics, and they're getting the shit shot out of them. And it was an operation to basically destroy the large force Taliban elements and try to kind of put an end to everything. And just didn't work out too well initially. And so somehow
you say you weren't initially on it. How were you guys staged as a react, or how'd that work out?
We were at Kandahar, right? And we had just really set up our operations, and our main mission was still to be rescue for the fighters in case a fighter went down, right? So that was really, and it took a long time for the Air Force to get out of the mindset of only leaving us for that and using us for other stuff. But things started getting really bad. And so we got scrambled up to a FARP, Texaco, which was off to the west of where the battle was going on. We're sitting up there all day. And
now FARP's like a forward reloading or rearming.
Refueling point, right? So
there we go.
There were 2 CH-47s there that were filled with gas. All the Apaches were coming back all shot up and shit. And I'm just sitting there going, fuck. This is like, you're like, oh shit, this is real now.
The real one, yeah.
Because that was first combat for me. I'm 40 years old, and I was like, damn, look at, imagine, I remember thinking, going, man, if you do that to this helicopter, imagine what it'll do to my face. Or just, and you're all like, you're just that feeling in your stomach, and you're like, oh shit, this is real.
Yeah.
And then they're like, okay, we're not going to need you guys. You can head back to Kandahar. And then literally we're running up, and we get a call on the radio. Hey, there's these wounded guys, and we've been trying to get them out all day, and all the aircraft are getting shot off the LZ, and we can't get them out. And it's night. Wondering, you guys have a FLIR, and we had done some rescues previously because of the FLIR. They're like, would you guys be willing to give it a shot? So my flight lead, Tom Cahill, is like, yeah, we shut down, we briefed it up. Tom, who got this, I was his co-pilot, he got the Silver Star that night. This is like a movie moment. He goes, hey boys, he calls us, all 12 of us from the 2 aircraft. He goes, I just want you guys to know, if we go do this, there's a good chance we're all gonna get fucked up. Does anybody have a problem? I remember, I'm in the back, I'm going, I kind of do have a problem, but nobody, but my buddy Scarecrow, one of the PJs, he's like, fuck no, let's go. And I'm like, well, I guess I can't be a pussy, so I guess I don't have a problem.
That's right.
So we end up going, and the mission is a shit show from day one. I didn't know this, but the JTAC was not co-located with the wounded guys. He was in a TOC somewhere, and we're getting all kinds of conflicting information. And again, you know, it's 22 years since that night, right? But just the fog of war fits the bill the best. We landed in one LZ, we got more, right? We're just, all right, let's get out of here. We landed in another LZ, these 10th Mountain guys jump on, right? And we're sitting there and the PJs goes, hey, these ain't the guys, sir. These are just some 10th Mountain snuffies who think we're exfilling them. And I'm like, shit, well, they got to go, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like out of Apocalypse. Remember the scene in Apocalypse Now where the guy's like, I'm not going?
Yeah.
Right? Well, now my PJ's got to, I mean, we laugh now, but I felt kind of bad. My PJ's got to manhandle these guys and basically throw them off the helicopter, right? So we take off, then we land in another LZ and we start getting lit up in that LZ. So we leave. Now we're bingo fuel, and we all agree we're not going to leave till we find these guys, right? We finally find the right LZ. It's all these
buzzsaws.
Remember those little, sort of lights, the diamond-shaped lights that flickered that guys would just put on their lapels?
Yeah.
Little lights. So there's all these lights going off, and finally we see a buzzsaw, right? And so we land in the LZ, we get these guys. We have whole blood on our aircraft, so we have to transfer that to the other aircraft. We each get one of the wounded guys. We take off, we land back at Bagram with 8 minutes of gas.
Oh, wow.
Right? And then, interestingly enough, as we're coming into Bagram, we hear Razor 01 and Razor 02 taxiing out. Those are the Roberts Ridge guys, right? Because it's March 3rd and March 2nd. I think that happened March 3rd. It might be, the dates might be a little whack, but like we hear them going out. And then, you know, my buddy who came over from the Army was a 160th guy, Tom.
Sword guy.
Who came over to the Air Force. He's on the radio and he's like, hey, Razor NSDQ. And they're like, all right, NSDQ, brother, which means Night Stalkers don't quit, right? And he's just giving, and then we roll back to Kandahar, swap aircraft hot with another crew who goes back to the FAR. So we're back at Kandahar with no aircraft. So we hit the rack, just kind of debrief everything, talking to my friend John, who had flown a similar mission the night before. His mission's on video. You can see all the RPGs like explode next to his aircraft. And I remember seeing him that night, and he was brushing his teeth. And I'm like, shit, I hope if I come back from getting shot up like that, I hope I can be as cool and brush my teeth. And I remember that night going, I'm going to go brush my teeth because I just survived this shit, right? And we go to sleep, and then they come in the next morning, scramble. So we get up, we're putting on our flight suit, I'm grabbing my weapons, and we're like, wait, we don't have any weapons. We don't have any helicopters.
Yeah, what are we scrambling to?
And they're like, and then the OPSO comes in, he goes, you're running on a C-130. We're going to fly up to the FARP and land up there. And you're going to hot offload, and you'll take the aircraft over from these guys because these two aircraft got shot down. You know, talking about the Roberts Ridge aircraft. And long story short, my buddy Ed, who had taken the aircraft from me the night before, he was there and he wanted to try to get in there, but they just won't let any helicopters go in there because it was so bad. That's probably the right decision. You know what I mean? But he was just really pissed because he was like, I can get in there and at least get a couple of wounded guys out, you know? And so we basically were there for that. And then that was that. And then flew, you know, a few more missions here or there, and then came back in April of 2002. So came home, and then I did another Afghanistan rotation after that. And then the rest of my rotations, I did 2 Afghanistan and 5 Iraq rotations. And, you know, same kind of stuff. Just, I got to fly some good missions. I wish I got to do the Pedro stuff in Afghanistan. I was supposed to go, and then my boss, I was an attached pilot. I mean, I was working at higher headquarters, and I had volunteered to go with a guard unit that was going, and I was all set to go with them. And then my old boss said, I need you to go with us a couple of months later. So he didn't let me go with them. And we were going to Iraq, not Afghanistan. because I wanted to go do that medevac mission with the pig. Because I mean, the guys who did it loved it. And,
Oh, I'm telling you what, those guys are something else. There was like we had guys go down a lot. Obviously, they're in the beginning, either host nation or partner, partner force or us, and every single time we had a guy go down, we call in a medevac, get the 9 line up, and these guys would come in and when we're hot LZ or when we're engaged, they're always flying with an escort. And that escort would come in first, do their thing. But the Blackhawks or whatever bird it was that they were flying, the Pedro unit, they would turn that first bird in would turn that thing almost like 90 degrees to the earth. And he's running a loop around the LZ or around where the LZ is going to be at. And I don't know if they're drawing fire or just putting that 50 cal straight down so that they can get some work in or what. But they would do that. And as they're doing that, the actual pickup bird to come right in and swoop in.
We have a tactic, where the bird not doing the pickup is providing support for the bird on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Plus we have the escorts and
those guys are amazing though. And then you'd get on them. They'd land right on the smoke every single time. Smoke right between the skids. And only one time did I have to carry a guy, out personally. But I remember having him on. They're insane. I had him on my back, run out there, and he just gets off nonchalant like he's at the beach, got his little, whatever that little thing is he's holding on to. Yeah, they always have that. Yeah, they're cool, man.
You want to talk about dudes who give 0 fucks?
That's them. Yeah.
Literally 0.
Yeah, that's a fact.
My buddy told me a story. PJ took a round to the chest in the vest, right?
Uh-huh.
And they're in the LZ, and my buddy said, because he goes, the PJ goes, "Hey, sir, I just took one to the chest. Can we hold up a second?" So now the pilot thinks he got shot in the chest, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And he's like, and then he goes, "Hey, can we hold up? I want to see if I can find a round and make a necklace of it."
Oh, it stopped it.
My buddy's like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" He's like, "Yo, I hit my vest." He goes, "No, dude, we got to go.
We got to go now. We're not holding on."
We got to go now, bro. And he ended up finding the round in the aircraft later. But, just, I've never seen these guys, no matter how crazy, how nuts, I've never seen them hesitate once.
No, they're awesome.
And for me, like, just working with people like that is what I miss. And working with the crews. And like I said, I had a chance. We had an aircraft shot down, and I was home at the time. And we had 5 guys killed, and 2 of the pilots survived. One survived. My buddy Dave, unfortunately, didn't. But in my unit, we like to send people from the unit to be with the family, right? We didn't want like the regular, because the Air Force will send some geekazoid, not even a pilot, we're like, no, we're sending guys from our unit. So we had an aircraft shot down. And my buddy Dave Wisniewski was in Bethesda. I was a family liaison. So I was there every day, and I was running into Marines every day, and they'd see my Jolly or Pedro patch.
Mm-hmm.
Literally like, "Oh, you got," and they'd be like, "Sir, you guys come in no matter what." I remember one guy telling me, "You guys do these crazy maneuvers. It's so cool." I'm like, "Listen, man, we're just trying not to run into each other."
Hell yeah.
They were all like, real. They would come up to me like, it was really amazing. The Commandant of the Marine Corps actually came and visited Dave, gave him a coin. Because when they found out a Pedro was there, he came in and visited Dave's family, and they gave them a coin because all of Marines we've been getting in and out, and that was pretty special. That was a good relationship, and whenever someone's in the green zone and they're not sure like about what I did or whatever, I go, "Hey, did the call sign Pedro?" And they go, "Yeah," and I'm like, "I was a Pedro," and honestly, like that's pretty much. That's instant credibility, like right
amongst
there.
Marines, at least of my generation of Marines, you say that, and it's like, yep,
credibility. So,
yep,
flying Air Force Combat Rescue was great. It was a great. It took a while to adjust to the Air Force because it was so non-military, and you could goof on the Navy all you want. The Navy's the military. You know what I mean? I know that there's a.
No. I've never heard that. I want you to go a little deeper into that.
Because it's constant knocking, and yes, a sailor on a ship's living a different life than a Marine grunt on a ship, but the Navy is about fighting. They just fight with ships and naval aviation. It there is a warfighter mentality in the Navy from the leadership. And while a Navy chief and a Marine gunny may look a little different, you know what I mean? That Navy chief may have a little bit of a belly or whatever. They lead the same way. In the Philippines, out of all these youngsters come over, and it's comical, but it's not, because you're trying to keep a kid from making a mistake. They come over there and they get these kids who never had a girlfriend in high school or whatever, and now they're, got this beautiful Filipino girl who's just treating them like a king, and they don't know what to do with themselves, and now they're 3 months later, like, oh, sure, I want to get married, and you're just like, you sure this is what you want? Yeah. And I usually call the chief in and I'd be like, Chief, I'm going to lunch. Can you counsel this young sailor on this? And I'd be like,
we're not doing weddings today.
I don't want to see any bruises. Just counsel, but they operated the same way, and
yeah.
It's just different. The Navy's different from the Marine Corps, but the Air Force is where it gets a little different. And I'm not slamming the Air Force because they're good at what they do, but the Air Force especially, I think I'm being generous when I say 15% of the Air Force will ever hear a shot fired in it, right? Mm-hmm. Changed a little bit in the war because you had guys driving convoys and individual augmentation to Army and Marine and Air Force. And, the Air Force security guys were outside the wire, and EOD guys. And so, but still, I think I'm being generous. So, and there was a particular Air Force chief of staff that kind of went from a leadership to management sort of mentality and corporate versus mentality. So the war was the best thing that ever happened to the Air Force in a long time, but it was just different. We had a lot of internal struggles with the Air Force because I had colonels come up to us and go, the Air Force has helicopters? So your own parent organization doesn't even know what you do. Like, no one knew what we did.
Sure.
So it'd be really frustrating at times. But I was in the fight part of the Air Force, and, we did a good job. And there's lots of people in the Air Force, combat controllers, PJs, TAC-Ps, EOD guys who are in there and get in the fight,
Yeah, there's things that I didn't even know until I started doing this podcast. Actually, one of my buddies that was in third group, Johnny Glenn, he's like, "Oh, you gotta get this Air Force cat. He was on my team," and I'm like, "What?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, he was like their air controller. He's like JTAC basically."
Yeah, TAC-P, yeah.
And he taught me all about it. Like, I had him on the show, and he was like, "Oh yeah," and I had no clue the Air Force had that. Had no clue.
Yeah.
And so
these guys live with the Army, they're
or Marines.
They're
He supported Raider Battalion and SF and everybody.
Yeah, so you, and again, the aviator, the pilots in the Air Force are doing the pilot thing, and there's nobody who doesn't love an A-10, so an
that's
A-10
a fact.
pilot, an A-10 pilot,
The stick man.
He's cool no matter where he's. He could be in a bunch of SEALs, a bunch of recon, a bunch of infantry grunts. He's the man because they've all had to see him come in and help out. So,
It's still not a big community, very small.
It's a different mentality because there's a lot of people in the Air Force that will never. Even at Balad, like, they had like karaoke, like, we'd be on alert. We'd go to the Green Bean and get coffee, and it's so different even for you. Like, I'm gonna be honest, we lived really good.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I ain't got nothing bad to say about that.
The only time we lived austere was our first Afghanistan deployment at Kandahar. And what was kind of funny about that is, so we had a lot of ex-Army pilots and me and a few others. So when we were burning our own shit, the only guys who knew field sanitation were the officers, right? So literally for the first 2 weeks, you had captains and lieutenants stirring shit. And it took about 2 weeks before one of us realized, why don't we give a fucking class so we don't have to do this? And then we grabbed a couple of the enlisted maintenance guys and goes, hey, here.
So that's where it started, eh?
Yeah, we're like, here's how you burn shit, and here's what you do, and now you guys have it, not us. Because literally, like, I remember, like, me and my buddy standing around stirring it and going, and you see two E2s walking by. Hey, how's it going, sir? We're like, what is wrong with this picture right
Fuck
now?
are we doing?
Like, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but, you know, it was pretty austere. We're eating MREs and, you know, mermites and stuff. But then, you know, we got to the bigger bases and we lived pretty good and get a cappuccino at night. Like, I still freak out at like the green bean where you have all these heavily armed dudes. Remember these British SAS dudes literally just back from a raid murdering people. And they're like, can I have a latte, please? And you're just like, you cannot make this shit up, bro.
I love
you
it.
can't make this shit up, you know? And I'm like, it was wild, but we lived pretty good. But, you know, the Air Force had karaoke night and we had theme night and, you know, we had great chow. And, but you know, so I mean, and we used to like, what we did was we'd fly around with all our shit that we compiled of stuff from any serviceman, and we'd fly out the fobs and just kick it out of the helicopter. We once, you know, because we knew you guys, it was horrible the way the guys lived, you know, so we always felt we'd bring our Maxim magazines and our Victoria's Secret.
Yes.
Just any gidunk we had. We did a full mission. My buddy's cousin was a rifle platoon commander, and his platoon had the perimeter at Al Assad Air Base. Okay. So we planned a training mission. We had all these Otis Spunkemeyer muffins. We had like boxes and boxes of them. We were sick of them, right? So we're like, we'll fly out there and we'll just kick these out to these Marines. And so we actually flew a time on target mission, came to a hover over their position, just kicked out all these boxes of Otis Spunkemeyer muffins, like you'd see them hitting guys in the head, and then we just left, you know. And the next day, like my buddy's cousin got in touch with him, was like, "That my boys love that, thank you."
That's
you know,
awesome.
They just loved it. But I mean, we lived good, but the job was great, and it was, you know, I'm very lucky, man. I don't want to keep you all night. Like, I've had an interesting and highly unusual and highly undistinguished career. But it was a lot of fun, man, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. It allows me to connect and be with people like yourself, and
yeah, man,
it just was great.
No, you have had it. It's an amazing career. I don't know if I've ever met anybody that served in as many branches as you have. I think that's definitely a first for me. But so, you have a well distinguished, decorated career flying helicopters for multiple branches, and I want to be honest with you right now. You're frozen on my screen.
Okay, man. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be on your show, bro. I appreciate it very much.
Yeah. So Yogi, I appreciate you, man. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate you being understanding with my medical stuff that came up that kind of prevented us a couple weeks ago from going live. But I'm glad we did it. I'm glad we put it down, and give me a little bit of time and I'll get this out to the people. For all you guys that are out there in the audience, if you took even one thing away from this recording or this episode, I ask that you just don't be selfish with the information. Share it out to the people that can take something from it, and they can take 40 years of experience from people like Yogi, putting themselves out there, putting their stories out there, and maybe you can take something and learn something from it, whether that's learn something good that he said, oh, I got you back, and if it's not something good that he said, maybe it's something that he fucked up, and you can learn how not to do that. And that's another great thing that comes from these.
Plenty of that.
Comes from these episodes. So again, sir, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate the understanding.
No, man, my pleasure. It was great to talk to you. I'm glad we got it done. I'm more than anything glad you're doing well, and glad we got to meet each other. And I hope to stay in touch with you, man. I'm a big fan of the podcast. I'm definitely, like I said, I struggle, and I know people who struggle, and I've worked hard post-military in the suicide prevention space. Mm-hmm. I'm more than willing to help and help guys with their transition, because it can be difficult, and it's not just the east side of the house. Always have just a difficult time, Yep. And leaving the military is tough sometimes. It takes a while to just come to grips with it.
Just get right, just feel right about it. Absolutely. And what was the organization you're part of?
So
again?
I was involved. I'm part of a group called Merging Vets and Players. started by Jay Glazer from Fox NFL.
Shout out.
Nate Boyer, who was a Green Beret and played for the Seahawks. Focuses on combat veterans and professional athletes, bringing them together and working with each other to help those transitions. I didn't know this, but the NFL has a huge suicide rate post-career wise.
Yeah, so real quick before we get off here, just leading into something else for the audience and for you, I actually have an NFL player that actually coaches that exact same stuff, Dominic Williams. I'm interviewing him on Monday evening, and he's going to talk about a lot of that same issue, how the sports professional athletes get to that shelf life, and it's usually shorter than ours. And then they have to.
Involved.
He may be, yeah.
He may or may not be involved with MVP. You know, I mean, we have a lot of, there's like about 8 chapters all over the country.
Okay.
I've been in the Vegas chapter for about 4.5, 5 years now. It's a great organization. And I also, you as a Marine, I organized the first Silkies hike here in Vegas.
Yes.
Warrior Silkies
yes.
hike.
I love
them. I try to
them.
go to at least one hike a year. I've been to the New York one.
Need to get down here to that Camp Lejeune one, baby. We'll link it up.
And I try to go to the Vegas one. I'm working this year, so I may go to the New York one in August. But I try to go one a year. And it was really cool to organize the first one here in Vegas. And there's
that's
other guys
awesome.
now keeping that going. Because
I love the people at Irreverent Warriors. Those are great people.
It's really been cool to be involved in both those organizations. Yeah, I lost a lot of friends to suicide, as I'm sure we have. And you know, I got lucky. I never had those dark thoughts. I did struggle, but not to that level. And you know, everybody I lost to suicide was a straight warrior. I mean, guys I looked up to, guys like my buddy Tom Cahill. I mean, he got the Silver Star that night with me, you know, and just looked up to these guys. They were, you know, better, braver, better pilots, just dudes, even though a lot of them were younger than me in age, I just looked up to them.
And an epidemic, man.
And then to see that happen, you know, it just breaks my heart, you know, and one thing I do believe, and I'll let you go after this, is people who serve this country, that doesn't necessarily have to be in combat. You raised your right hand. I don't care if you play cards on a ship off the coast or wherever, or we're kicking doors down with, cat and everything in between. You deserve to live a happy, good life.
Mm-hmm.
And
you deserve to live. You deserve to live.
Right. And anything I can do to help guys realize that they have worth, that there's no reason to take that drastic a step, and that no matter how bad it is, you know, through the help of the man upstairs and everything else, you know, we can come through these things.
That's right.
And the main thing is to just be with our brothers and sisters, who are probably the number one tool that'll help us get through.
That's a fact.
So, you know, that's it. And I've been blessed to be with those organizations. You know, look them up. You know, they'd be good people to get on the podcast. We can get guys like Nate Boyer on the show and things like that. They can reach they got huge platforms and can help a lot of veterans.
Right on. Well, you guys heard it there. We're going to leave it there with Yogi, and we'll see you guys next time on Choices Not Chances.
Well, that concludes this episode. Thanks for listening to Choices Not Chances podcast. Please share, like, and subscribe wherever you listen or watch our podcast. You can also follow us on social media at Choices Not Chances podcast. Thanks, and have a great day.
Louisiana Gun Shop, your firearm headquarters, specializing in concealed carry guns, ammo, and training. You can get your Louisiana permit with us. Also a large selection of AR-15s, or if you are that build-it-yourself type of guy or gal, we have all the parts to build and customize your own AR-15. Glock, SIG, Taurus, Ruger. We have all the brands, both in the store or at LouisianaGunShop.com.
Not too far. You're marking a building. Hit him. Yeah, that's good. That's a good shot. That's money. Yeah.